Two award-winning sisters were offered an upgrade to the presidential suite. They refused. But when asked to surrender their own luxury seats for a wealthy patron, their one quiet phone call triggered a corporate meltdown. The morning air in Paris's Gare de Lyon station tasted of steel, steam, and ambition. Throngs of travelers flowed like a river around islands of luggage, but for Maya and Lena Petrova, the chaos was a distant hum. Identical twin sisters, they were the co-founders and creative force behind Petrova Designs, a firm that had reshaped skylines with buildings that were not just structures, but arguments for a better way of living. Their design philosophy was their life's mantra: integrity, from the foundation to the spire. Today was a day for celebration. They were en route to Monaco to accept the Golden Caliper, the highest honor in international architecture. It was the culmination of a decade of relentless work, of battling contractors who said their designs were impossible and clients who questioned their youth and their vision. They had won. Their train, the legendary Azure Star, was less a mode of transport and more a rolling work of art. A steward in a crisp, navy blue uniform with polished brass buttons checked their tickets and personally escorted them onto the platform. "Madame Petrova," he said with a deferential bow. "Welcome aboard." They were led to the very front of the train, to a carriage marked with a single, elegant number, 1. This was the Panorama Suite, a private cabin that was the jewel of the Azure Star. They had booked it 6 months in advance, a justifiable indulgence for a journey marking their greatest triumph. The door slid open with a whisper, revealing a space that took their breath away. A single, curved wall of seamless glass wrapped around the suite, offering an uninterrupted 180-degree view of the journey ahead. The seats were upholstered in plush, sapphire blue velvet, deep enough to sink into. A small mahogany table stood between them, upon which a bottle of champagne rested in a silver bucket, beads of condensation tracing lines down its side. The air smelled of old leather, wood polish, and the faint, floral scent of fresh lilies in a crystal vase. "Well," Maya said, her voice a low murmur of appreciation as she ran a hand over the smooth wood of the table. "This is correct." Lena smiled, her eyes mirroring her sister's. It was a language they shared, a silent acknowledgement of beauty and precision. They stowed their briefcases, containing the final draft of their acceptance speech, in a sleek overhead compartment. The train gave a gentle lurch, the station beginning to slide away from them as the French countryside began to paint itself across their vast, private window. For the first hour, the world was perfect. They spoke in the easy shorthand of twins, refining their speech, debating a single word here, a turn of phrase there. They weren't just sisters, they were two halves of a single, formidable mind. Lena, with her sharp, analytical gaze, focused on structure and logic. Maya, whose hands were always sketching, sculpted the emotion and the narrative. Together, they were unstoppable. The champagne remained unopened. They were working, and the work was sacred. The rhythm of the train was a soothing percussion beneath them, a steady beat carrying them toward their moment of recognition. The sun warmed the glass, casting a golden glow over the suite. It was a pocket of absolute peace, a space they had earned, paid for, and now inhabited with the quiet confidence of women who knew their worth. Then, a discreet knock, sharp and precise, echoed on the polished wood of their suite door. It was a sound that didn't belong in their bubble of tranquility. Lena looked at Maya, a silent question passing between them. Maya gave a slight shrug. "Room service, perhaps." Lena slid the door open. Standing there was a man who introduced himself as Mr. Dubois, the train's chief steward. He was tall and slender, with silver hair combed back from his forehead and a smile that was perfectly polite but didn't reach his cool, assessing eyes. He held his hands clasped behind his back, a posture of serene authority. But something in his gaze made the quiet peace of the suite curdle. He wasn't there to offer them anything. He was there to take something away. "Ladies," Mr. Dubois began, his voice smooth and practiced, the kind of voice that could deliver bad news and make it sound like an inevitability. He glanced past them into the suite, his eyes taking in the spectacular view before settling on them again. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "Is there a problem, Mr. Du Bois?" Maya asked, her tone even. She remained seated, a subtle but clear indication that this was their space he was intruding upon. "Not a problem, no. More of a delicate situation that requires your understanding," he said, his smile tightening. He gestured vaguely down the corridor behind him. Standing there, partially obscured, was an older white man in a rumpled tweed jacket. He held himself with an air of impatient entitlement, his gaze fixed on the suite as if he were already measuring it for curtains. This was, Du Bois's posture implied, the reason for the interruption. "One of our most distinguished passengers," Du Bois continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "Mr. Harrington. His family has been patronizing the Azure Star since its maiden voyage. He is, you might say, a part of our heritage. A legacy patron." Lena's expression remained placid, a mask of polite interest she had perfected over years of boardroom meetings. "That's a lovely story. How can we help you, Mr. Du Bois?" she asked, her voice deliberately cutting through the preamble. Du Bois finally came to the point. "Unfortunately, due to a small error in our booking system, Mr. Harrington's customary suite, this suite, the Panorama No. 1, was made available. It has been his for this particular journey for the last 20 years. It's a tradition." He paused, letting the weight of that word hang in the air. "We were hoping, as a gesture of goodwill, that you would be willing to relocate to another of our premium suites. The Ruby Suite, for example. It is very nice, I assure you." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken meaning. Lena and Maya exchanged a look. It was a glance that contained a library of shared experiences, of being underestimated, overlooked, and politely asked to shrink. Here it was again, Maya thought, a familiar weariness settling deep in her bones. The quiet assumption. The polite erasure. The unspoken belief that their claim to a space was somehow less valid, more negotiable, than someone else's. Maya leaned forward slightly. "Is there an issue with our tickets, Mr. Du Bois?" she asked, her voice still calm, but with a new, firm edge. No, your tickets are perfectly in order." "Is Panorama Suite No. 1 double-booked?" Lena pressed. Du Bois hesitated, the first crack in his polished facade. "Technically, no. But in spirit, you understand. It is a matter of courtesy. Of respecting a long-standing tradition. We also have a tradition," Maya said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying more weight than all of Du Bois's pronouncements. "We respect agreements that have been made and paid for." Mr. Harrington, growing tired of waiting in the corridor, took a step forward. He peered into the suite, his gaze sweeping over the sisters as if they were temporary fixtures. "Is this sorted, Du Bois?" he asked, his voice gravelly with impatience. "I'd like to get settled." The chief steward's composure began to fray. He turned back to the sisters, his polite smile vanishing, replaced by a look of stern appeal. "Ladies, please. I am trying to resolve this with a minimum of fuss. It is the flagship journey of the season. We simply cannot have our most loyal patron displaced. It reflects poorly on us all. It was the us all that did it." The casual inclusion of them in his problem, as if they were collaborators in their own dismissal. "I'm afraid this suite is perfect for our needs," Lena said, her voice final. She gave a small, dismissive shake of her head. "We'll be staying." For a moment, Du Bois looked genuinely stunned, as if their refusal was a possibility he had never seriously entertained. His face hardened. "I must insist," he began, his voice rising. But he was cut off. Lena had already turned away from him, her movements fluid and deliberate. She reached into her briefcase and retrieved her phone. She didn't look at Du Bois or Harrington. Her focus was absolute. She wasn't going to argue. She wasn't going to raise her voice. She was going to end it. Mr. Du Bois watched as Lena unlocked her phone, a flicker of deep annoyance crossing his face. He clearly assumed she was preparing to file a complaint through some anonymous customer service channel, a futile gesture he could easily manage later. He opened his mouth to speak again, likely to deliver a final, condescending warning about the consequences of being difficult. He never got the chance. Lena navigated to her contacts and tapped a name. The phone rang once, twice, before a voice answered, a voice that, even through the small speaker of the phone, seemed to take up all the air in the suite. It was deep, calm, and radiated an effortless authority. "Lena," the voice said. "Everything on schedule?" "Marcus, it's Lena," she replied, her own voice a stark contrast to the tension in the cabin. It was relaxed, almost casual. "Mostly. We're on the Azure Star. There seems to be a slight misunderstanding about our suite." She paused, her eyes briefly meeting Dubois's. "They're asking us to move for another patron." She didn't need to say more. She pressed a button on the screen, and the voice on the other end was no longer confined to her ear. It filled the space, crisp and commanding. "A misunderstanding?" Marcus Thorne's voice echoed in the silent suite. "Put the chief steward on the line, please." The shift was instantaneous and absolute. It was as if a switch had been flipped, plunging the scene into a new, stark light. Dubois's face, which had been a mask of haughty impatience, went slack with confusion. The name Marcus clearly meant nothing to him. But the tone was unmistakable. It was the sound of power, pure and undiluted. Hesitantly, Dubois leaned forward. "This is Chief Steward Dubois." "To whom am I speaking?" "This is Marcus Thorne," the voice stated, each word landing like a hammer blow. "I am the Chief Development Officer for the Sovereign Hotel Group." A flicker of recognition. The Sovereign Group was a global titan of luxury, a name synonymous with five-star experiences. Dubois's back straightened, a dawning unease in his eyes. Marcus continued, his voice devoid of any emotion. "As you know, your railway has an exclusive partnership with our brand. A multi-year, 8-figure contract to be the sole featured rail experience in our sovereign travel packages. A contract, I might add, that is currently under review for renewal." Dubois went pale. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, sickly sheen. He now understood. He understood completely. "The Mrs. Petrova," Marcus's voice cut through the steward's rising panic, "are not just passengers. They are our honored guests for the awards in Monaco. They represent the exact caliber of clientele this partnership is meant to attract and celebrate. Their presence on your train is, in fact, a key part of our current assessment." He paused for a beat, a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. "So let me be perfectly clear. Their journey is to be flawless. You are to solve whatever misunderstanding has occurred. Immediately. Am I understood?" Yes, Mr. Thorne." Crystal clear, Dubois stammered, his voice a choked whisper. "Good." The line went dead. The click of the call ending was as loud as a gunshot in the tomb-like silence. Mr. Dubois stood frozen for a moment, his face a canvas of disbelief and terror. The entire power dynamic of the universe had just been rewritten in 90 seconds, and he was on the wrong side of the equation. Mr. Harrington, who had overheard every word from the corridor, looked from the phone to Dubois, his own entitled indignation curdling into shocked embarrassment. The sisters hadn't just refused. They had dropped a bomb. The silence that followed the call was more damning than any shouting match could have been. Mr. Dubois seemed to physically shrink. The proud, authoritative posture was gone, replaced by the stooped shoulders of a man who had just seen his career flash before his eyes and end in a train wreck. Without another word, he turned and practically fled down the corridor. Mr. Harrington, left standing alone, looked utterly bewildered. His world, governed by tradition and inherited status, had just collided with a different kind of power, one that was swift, digital, and absolute. He opened his mouth as if to protest, then thought better of it, a flush of crimson creeping up his neck. Within 2 minutes, a new figure appeared, rushing down the corridor with such haste his uniform jacket was slightly askew. This was the train director, a man whose face was etched with a frantic, all-consuming panic. He stopped at the door of the suite, breathless, his eyes wide with desperation. "Miss Petrova." "Miss Petrova," he panted, addressing Maya and Lena with a reverence previously reserved for royalty. "Please, allow me to offer my deepest, most sincere apologies. There has been a grave, an inexcusable error on our part. Please, rest assured it is being handled. Your comfort is our absolute, paramount priority." He gestured sharply with his head, and 2 junior stewards materialized, their expressions a mixture of fear and awe. They approached Mr. Harrington. "Sir," one of them said, his voice quiet but firm, "if you would please come with us, we will escort you to your assigned seat." The walk of shame was a spectacle of quiet humiliation. Mr. Harrington, the legacy patron, was led back down the length of the VIP carriage, past the other suites where doors were now cracked open, curious and astonished faces peering out. The whispers followed him like a trail of smoke. He didn't look at anyone, his gaze fixed on the plush carpet as he was escorted back toward the standard class carriages from which he had come. Maya watched him go before sliding the suite doors shut with a soft, definitive click. The sanctuary was theirs again, but the peace had been shattered. She and Lena sat in silence for a long moment, the hum of the train the only sound. The adrenaline from the confrontation began to fade, leaving behind the familiar, bitter taste of exhaustion. It was a victory, but it felt hollow. It was a fight they had won, but one they should never have had to wage. Around them, the azure star continued its serene glide through the French countryside. The sun still shone, the scenery was still breathtaking, but a shadow had fallen over it all. Without a word, Lena picked up her folio. Maya did the same. They turned back to the notes for their acceptance speech, their faces composed, their focus returning to the work. They didn't speak of what had happened. They didn't need to. But in the space between them, the unspoken truth lingered. They were 2 of the most celebrated architects in the world, on their way to receive their profession's highest honor, and they had still been forced to prove they belonged. By the time the azure star slid gracefully into the Monaco station, the story had already outrun the train. The sun-drenched platform, crowded with the well-heeled and beautiful, was buzzing with a new energy. Phones were held aloft, not just to capture the glamour of the principality, but to share and consume the drama that had unfolded in Panorama Suite No. 1. A passenger in the suite opposite the Petrovas, a young tech influencer, had filmed the entire exchange on his phone. He had captured it all, the sisters' unshakable calm, Mr. Dubois's initial arrogance, Mr. Harrington's simmering entitlement, and the train director's frantic, groveling apology. He had uploaded it with a simple caption, "Class versus classism on the Azure Star. You won't believe how it ends." It went viral before the train had even crossed the Italian border. The hashtags were relentless and damning, hashtag Azure Star shame, hashtag integrity on the rails, hashtag Petrova power. News outlets, from gossip blogs to prestigious financial journals, picked it up. Headlines bloomed across the internet, architectural stars racially profiled on luxury train, and Petrova designs quiet power play exposes corporate rot on famed railway. In a boardroom in Geneva, the CEO of the Azure Star's parent company was watching a crisis unfold in real time. The company's stock had taken a sudden, sharp dip. The PR department was in a full-blown panic, drafting apologies that sounded increasingly hollow. But the real damage wasn't happening on Twitter. It was happening in a quiet, formal email. Marcus Thorne had sent his official notice. It was a masterpiece of corporate annihilation. A fundamental breach of the values our brand represents, one passage read. The Sovereign Group partners with experiences that embody flawless service, respect, and inclusivity. The treatment of our honored guests, the Mrs. Petrova, demonstrates a systemic failure to provide a safe and respectful environment. The final paragraph was the kill shot. Effective immediately, the Sovereign Group is placing our multi-million-dollar partnership under final review, with a strong recommendation for termination. We cannot, in good conscience, direct our global clientele to a service where dignity is negotiable. The fallout was swift, brutal, and designed to send a message. The company's fumbling public apology was drowned out by the news of the consequences. The entire VIP on-board crew of that Azure Star journey, from the stewards to the director, Mr. Du Bois included, was summarily fired. The company's vice president of guest experience, a man with a 30-year career, tendered his resignation within hours. The cost of disrespecting Maya and Lena Petrova was being calculated in millions of dollars and shattered careers. The company hadn't just lost a contract, it had lost the one thing a luxury brand cannot survive without, its prestige. The sisters themselves said nothing publicly. They didn't have to. The world was speaking for them. The grand ballroom of the Hotel de Paris glittered. Crystal chandeliers cast a diamond-like glow over a sea of tuxedos and couture gowns. This was the pinnacle of the architectural world, the Golden Caliper Awards. And tonight, Maya and Lena Petrova were the undisputed center of it all. As they moved through the room, a path seemed to clear for them. The whispers that followed were no longer just about their revolutionary designs, they were about the incident on the train. They were whispers of respect, of awe. When their names were called for the grand prize, the applause was thunderous. They ascended the stage, two identical figures of grace and power, moving as one. They stood at the podium, sharing a single microphone, and the entire, glittering room fell silent. Maya began, her voice clear and steady. She thanked the awards committee, their dedicated team at Petrova Designs, and their clients who had trusted their vision. Then, her eyes lifted, scanning the faces of the most powerful people in her industry. She paused, letting the silence stretch, drawing every ounce of attention in the room onto her. "In our work," she said, her voice resonating with a quiet intensity, "the foundation is everything. A building is a promise. It's a promise of shelter, of beauty, of permanence. We've always believed that the most important material we build with is not steel or glass. It is integrity." She looked at her sister, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "We don't design for conflict," Maya continued, her gaze returning to the audience. "But we design for integrity. Because a structure without integrity, no matter how beautiful its facade, will eventually collapse." A stunned silence held the room for a single, breathless moment. And then, the applause erupted. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was a roar. It started in the front rows and swept through the entire ballroom, a wave of sound and emotion as every single person rose to their feet. They weren't just applauding a building. They understood. They were applauding the calm, unyielding defense of dignity. It was a standing ovation for two women who had reminded everyone in that room that the true measure of a structure, whether a skyscraper or a person, is how it holds up under pressure. As they walked off the stage, award in hand, they knew the headlines would fade. But the echo of that day would remain. It was never just about a suite on a train. It was about the space they commanded in the world, a space they had meticulously designed and built for themselves, a space whose integrity was non-negotiable. This story is about more than just a seat. It's about dignity. What does integrity mean to you in your professional life? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. Let's have a real conversation. And if this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that matters.